I always knew this day would come. Sitting in our family's mahogany-paneled conference room, watching my Uncle Richard's face redden with what he thought was righteous anger, I felt strangely calm. The Winters family quarterly meeting had turned into exactly what I'd prepared for over the last 3 years. The numbers don't lie, Uncle Richard declared, pacing in front of the antique fireplace that had witnessed 4 generations of family politics. The trust's performance has dropped 12% since Alexandra gained voting rights. That's $240 million in losses. He slammed the financial report onto the gleaming table. My cousins Marcus and Victoria exchanged knowing looks. Aunt Patricia clutched her Hermes scarf, while my younger brother Thomas studied his Rolex, carefully avoiding my eyes. They'd all dressed for what they thought was my execution. Designer suits, family jewelry, perfect hair. I'd chosen a simple black blazer from Target, making them think I couldn't afford better. Furthermore, Uncle Richard continued, gesturing at the screen behind him, Alexandra has consistently blocked our traditional investment strategies. She's opposed every real estate acquisition we've proposed. I took a slow sip of water, remembering the properties they'd pushed. Overpriced developments in Miami, empty office buildings in Detroit, a failing casino in Atlantic City. All terrible investments dressed up in glossy presentations. The trust bylaws are clear, my cousin Marcus chimed in, straightening his Brioni tie. Any trustee whose actions result in significant losses can be removed by majority vote. He practiced that line, probably in front of his bathroom mirror. The family council consisted of 12 members. I counted the subtle nods around the table. They'd secured their votes before this meeting even started. Classic Uncle Richard, always preparing for war while preaching about family unity. Alexandra, Aunt Patricia leaned forward, pearls clicking against the table. Darling, perhaps this is for the best. You can focus on. What is it you do again? Investment management, I replied quietly. Victoria snickered. Running a little Robinhood account isn't exactly investment management, cousin. I thought about the key card in my pocket, the one that accessed the real investment office 6 blocks away. The one they knew nothing about. Yet. Before we vote, I said, pulling out my laptop, I'd like to present some additional data. There's nothing to present. Uncle Richard cut in. The losses are clear. All in favor of removing Alexandra from the Winters family trust. Hands rose around the table. My brother Thomas raised his last, still not meeting my eyes. 30 pieces of silver must buy a lot of German sports cars these days. Perfect timing, I said, connecting my laptop to the projector. Now we can discuss who actually manages the trust's investments. Uncle Richard frowned. We know who manages. Do you? I pulled up the first slide. 3 years ago, when I gained voting rights, I also became an independent investment manager. I established Winter Capital Partners. Your little side project. Victoria smirked. My firm, I continued, which now manages $8.2 billion in assets, including, as of last quarter, the majority of the Winters family trust funds. The room went silent. On the screen, transaction records appeared, showing the gradual transfer of our trust's investments to my management over the past 3 years. That's impossible, Marcus sputtered. The trust funds are with Sterling Management. Sterling Management, I smiled, which was acquired by Winter Capital Partners 6 months ago. That 12% drop Uncle Richard mentioned, it's the old portfolio he still sees. The funds I manage have grown 27% year over year. Uncle Richard's face had gone from red to pale. You can't. The bylaws don't prohibit trustees from managing investments through qualified firms, I continued. In fact, they encourage it. Section 7, paragraph 4, which you all apparently didn't read. I clicked to the next slide. This is your Miami development property. The image showed a half-built abandoned structure. And this, click, is where I invested those funds instead. A gleaming tech campus appeared. Current ROI, 340%. Thomas finally looked up from his watch. Why didn't you tell us? You never asked. Too busy, assuming I was failing. I stood up, smoothing my target blazer. Now, about that vote. Before you remove me, you should know that Winter Capital Partners requires 6 months' notice to transition managed assets, during which time, as CEO, I have full investment discretion. The implications hung in the air like expensive perfume at a funeral. 6 months was a long time to manage billions of dollars when you're angry. However, I picked up my water glass. I'm happy to continue managing the trust's assets. Our performance speaks for itself. Unless you prefer, I focus on my other clients. Other clients? Aunt Patricia whispered. Did you think the Winters Trust was my only account? I opened my laptop's browser, showing the Winter Capital Partners client list. Major pension funds, tech companies, 3 competing family offices. The room erupted in chaos. Uncle Richard demanded proof. Marcus started texting furiously, probably trying to verify my claims. Victoria looked like she'd swallowed her family crest. But I wasn't done. Not even close. Now, I said over the noise, let's talk about what happened to that missing $240 million Uncle Richard mentioned. The silence that followed was deafening. Uncle Richard's hand trembled slightly as he reached for his Mont Blanc pen, a tell he'd had since I was 12, watching him from the corner of family meetings, while he manipulated votes and twisted arms. The missing $240 million, I continued, pulling up a new spreadsheet, wasn't lost. It was deliberately hidden. I highlighted a series of transactions, transferred through 7 shell companies before landing here. The final destination blinked on screen. Cayman Islands account, beneficiary, Richard Winters. This is absurd, Uncle Richard sputtered, but his pen dropped to the table. You're fabricating. J.P. Morgan's forensic accounting team verified everything. I distributed sealed blue folders to each council member. They're very thorough when potential fraud involves billions. Victoria flipped through her folder, her French manicure trembling. These transfers, they're signed by both Uncle Richard and Marcus. Marcus stood up so fast his chair crashed backward. This is a setup. You manipulated these documents to take control. I clicked to the next slide. Security footage appeared, showing Marcus and Uncle Richard in this very room at 2 a.m. 6 months ago, hunched over laptops. The cameras in here aren't just for show. They record everything, including late-night money movements. Thomas finally found his voice. You knew? All this time? I've known since they started, I replied, remembering the alert that popped up on my phone that first night. Every transaction, every shell company, every offshore transfer. I tracked them all. Why didn't you stop them? Aunt Patricia asked, her pearls clutched so tight they might snap. Because I pulled up another document. I needed to understand the whole scheme, including who else was involved. The screen filled with email correspondence. Cousin Victoria's name appeared prominently, along with her husband's law firm. Victoria's perfect composure cracked. Those emails are privileged. Not when they detail criminal conspiracy. I turned to face her directly. Did you really think using your husband's firm to create those shell companies would keep it hidden? Amateur move, cousin. The room erupted again. Thomas shot to his feet, pointing at Uncle Richard. You promised me the European expansion if I voted with you today. Sit down, Uncle Richard barked, but his authority was evaporating like morning fog. I let them argue for exactly 2 minutes before pressing a button on my phone. The conference room doors opened, and 3 men in suits entered. This is Mr. Peters from the SEC. I gestured to the first man. And these are Agents Miller and Thompson from the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. They're very interested in offshore accounts and family trust fraud. Uncle Richard's face went from red to gray. Marcus dropped into his fallen chair. Victoria started crying, perfectly silent tears that wouldn't ruin her makeup. However, I continued, as trustee and CEO of Winter Capital Partners, I have a proposal. The room fell silent again. Even the FBI agents waited, having been briefed on what was coming. Option 1. I submit all evidence of fraud, tax evasion, and conspiracy. You face federal charges, asset seizure, and public scandal. The Winters name becomes synonymous with fraud. I let that sink in before continuing. Option 2. Full confession, immediate resignation from the Trust Council, and transfer of your voting rights to independent trustees I've selected. You keep your freedom, but not your power. You can't do this, Uncle Richard whispered, but his eyes showed he knew I could. I already have. I opened one last file on my laptop. The trust bylaws give emergency powers to any trustee who uncovers criminal activity. I executed those powers this morning. Your personal accounts are frozen pending review. Marcus lunged for his phone, probably to call his broker. All accounts, I emphasized, even the hidden ones. Thomas looked at me with something between fear and awe. What about the rest of us? Those not involved in the fraud keep their positions and privileges. After today's vote is nullified, of course. I met each council member's eyes. Choose carefully who you support going forward. Aunt Patricia was the first to move, sliding her chair away from Uncle Richard. Others followed, physical distance marking the death of old alliances. You have 1 hour to decide, I said, checking my watch. The SEC has a press conference scheduled for noon, either announcing arrests or praising the Winters family's cooperation with a routine audit. Victoria broke first. I'll sign whatever you want. Her survival instincts were always strongest. Marcus and Uncle Richard exchanged looks. 3 decades of financial conspiracy crumbling in minutes. The documents are with my assistant next door, I said, along with evidence of every other scheme you've run since I was in college. Did you really think I spent these 3 years doing nothing but watching? They filed out slowly, escorted by the agents. Thomas lingered last, looking lost. The European expansion is still available, I told him, if you earn it properly this time. He nodded and left, leaving me alone in the room where I'd once been the quiet observer, the underestimated niece, the trustee they thought they could bully out. My phone buzzed. A text from my real office. Goldman Sachs called. They heard rumors about Sterling's management changes. Want to discuss increasing their investment. I smiled, straightening my target blazer. The morning's theatrics had served their purpose, but the real work was just beginning. After all, revenge wasn't my goal. This was about building something better from the ashes of their greed. And I was just getting started. By 3 p.m., the landscape of the Winters family empire had shifted seismically. I sat in my real office, the penthouse suite of a downtown high-rise with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The Target blazer was gone, replaced by what I actually wore to run an $8.2 billion investment firm. A tailored Armani suit that cost more than what they thought I made in a year. My phone hadn't stopped buzzing since the SEC's press conference, where they'd praised the Winters Family Trust's proactive cooperation in uncovering certain irregularities. The family's PR team was already spinning it as a triumph of corporate governance. Maya, my chief of staff, entered with a stack of documents. They're all signing, even Richard. Of course they are, I replied, watching a Bloomberg alert scroll across my desk monitor. Winter Capital PRTNERS, CUNFIRMS, ACQUIS ITION of Steering Management SCTTs under management ECED $12 billion. Your brother's here, Maya added. Says it's important. I nodded. Send him in. And call Goldman. Tell them I'll take their meeting tomorrow. Thomas entered like a different person than the one who'd raised his hand against me this morning. Gone was the arrogant cousin who'd bought his way into the family's good graces. He looked younger, almost like the brother I'd grown up with. That blazer, he said, taking a seat. The whole quiet, submissive act. You played us all. You played yourselves. I turned my monitor, showing him the family trust's real performance charts. Too busy looking down on me to look at what I was building. $8 billion, he whispered. And now 12 with Sterling Public. He leaned forward. How long have you been planning this? I pulled up an old photo on my screen. Me at 22, graduating with dual degrees in finance and computer science. Uncle Richard stood beside me, smirking as he told reporters I was exploring my options before joining the family business. Since that day, I said, when Richard announced he was making Marcus head of investments instead of me. Family tradition, he called it. Women aren't suited for high finance. I remember. Thomas looked away. I laughed. Everyone did. I stood, walking to the window. So I built my own firm. Quietly, strategically, hired the best talent Richard kept overlooking because they didn't fit his country club image. Women, minorities, young innovators. And now you control everything, Thomas said. Not everything. I turned back to him. Just what matters. My phone buzzed. Maya's text. Victoria's husband just arrived. With lawyers. Right on schedule, I murmured. Thomas, you should see this. I pressed a button, and my office wall became transparent, revealing the conference room next door. Victoria's husband James sat with 3 attorneys, all looking grim as my legal team presented documents. What are they showing him? Thomas asked. Proof that his law firm knowingly facilitated tax evasion. I sat back down. In about 2 minutes, he'll realize the choice he faces. Surrender his partnership and take a public censure or risk disbarment and federal charges. Victoria will divorce him within a week, Thomas predicted. 3 days, I corrected. She's already contacted a divorce attorney. My surveillance team intercepted the calls. Thomas stared at me. You have surveillance on everyone? Only those who tried to steal from the family. I pulled up another file. Like your private meetings with Richard about the European expansion. He flinched. Alex, save it. I'd pushed a folder across my desk. Inside is your new position, head of European operations. Real this time, not Richard's empty promise. You'll report directly to the board, not me. Prove yourself. And in 3 years, you can earn voting rights back. Why? He asked, hands trembling as he took the folder. Because you're my brother. And unlike them, you were just misguided, not malicious. I met his eyes. Don't make me regret this. My phone buzzed again. Maya. Richards called an emergency family meeting at his house. All council members. I smiled. Right on schedule. You're not going? Thomas asked. Oh, I'll be there. I pressed another button, and a new image appeared on my wall screen. Live feed from Uncle Richard's study. The family was gathering, faces tense. How did you? I own the security company that protects all family properties. I explained. Have for 2 years. Every camera, every alarm, every private conversation. I hear everything. Thomas shook his head slowly. The quiet one in the corner. That's how they always described you at family meetings. The quiet one who watched and listened. The quiet ones are always the most dangerous. I said, standing. We should go. They'll be expecting us. Us? You need to start rebuilding trust, brother. This is your first test. I gathered my things, checking the markets one last time. Besides, you won't want to miss what happens next. What does happen next? He asked, following me to the private elevator. I smiled, thinking of the documents being delivered to every family member's house right now. The complete audit of every secret account, every hidden deal, every whispered conspiracy. Next, I said as the elevator doors closed, we rewrite the family legacy. And this time, we do it my way. The sun was setting as my driver pulled up, casting long shadows across the city I'd quietly conquered. In Uncle Richard's study, the family was gathering for what they thought was their counterattack. They had no idea what was coming, but they were about to find out. The mood in Uncle Richard's study was fractured when Thomas and I arrived. Gone was the united front from this morning's vote. Now they sat in nervous clusters, whispers dying as we entered. The room smelled of expensive scotch and desperate schemes. Uncle Richard stood by his prized Monet, the one he'd bragged about acquiring for $20 million. Alexandra, he forced a smile. We've been discussing terms. Have you? I moved to the center of the room, noting the open folders on everyone's desks, the full audits I'd hand delivered. Before you continue, that moment's a forgery. The real one's in a private collection in Geneva. You were scammed 5 years ago. He staggered slightly. Victoria gasped. Even in crisis, they cared about appearances. But that's not why we're here. I opened my laptop, connecting to the room's hidden cameras. The wall screen flickered to life, displaying a real-time feed of the FBI raiding Sterling Management's offices. This is happening at every shell company office simultaneously. Marcus lunged forward. You promised no arrests if we signed. I promised no arrests for those who cooperated fully. I corrected. Your 3 p.m. transfer attempt to a new Cayman account violated that agreement. The color drained from his face. Aunt Patricia turned on him, pearls swinging. You did what? Oh, he tried to move $50 million, I continued. My systems blocked it, of course, just like they blocked Victoria's husband from transferring partnership shares this afternoon. Victoria burst into tears. Real ones this time. He said he had a plan. Men always have plans, I noted dryly. That's why I built better ones. Thomas moved to stand beside me, a small gesture that spoke volumes to the family. The golden boy choosing sides. What happens now? Aunt Patricia asked quietly. I sat in Uncle Richard's chair, the power position he'd occupied for 30 years. Now we rebuild, properly this time. The screen changed to show Winter Capital Partners' latest performance metrics. Our legitimate investments outperformed the market by 31%. No fraud needed. No offshore schemes. Just intelligent, ethical asset management. The press, Uncle Richard started, will report that the Winters family, led by its youngest trustee, uncovered and corrected historical irregularities. I cut in. The SEC's already approved the narrative. Your reputation survive, provided you follow the new rules. I distributed new folders, thick documents with tab sections. Inside, you'll find the revised roles. Reduced compensation, obviously. No direct investment authority, but legitimate jobs with real responsibilities. They reached for the folders like drowning people grabbing lifelines. Patricia, you'll head our charitable foundation. Victoria, client relations. Your social skills might as well benefit the firm. Marcus, I paused. Compliance Department Junior Analyst. You'll learn how to spot fraud from the other side. And me, Uncle Richard asked hoarsely. Retirement. Effective immediately. The Palm Beach house is yours, but the jet gets sold. He slumped, decades of dominance evaporating. The trust itself, I continued, will be managed professionally. By my firm, naturally. Your quarterly distributions continue, provided you maintain ethical standards. One violation and they convert to basic living stipends. Thomas stepped forward. And those who prove trustworthy can earn back privileges. Slowly, I met each pair of eyes. This isn't punishment. It's rehabilitation. The Winters name should mean something more than old money and hidden fraud. My phone buzzed. Maya sending the evening's market close numbers. Our public holdings were up 3% since the SEC announcement. The market loved a clean house. You've thought of everything, Aunt Patricia murmured. No, I stood smoothing my Armani suit. I just listened. All those years, sitting quietly while you plotted and schemed. I learned how power really works. I smiled. It's not about dominance. It's about responsibility. Victoria dabbed her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. When did you become this? I always was this. You just never bothered to look. I packed up my laptop. Monthly meetings start next week. Attendance is mandatory. Miss one, your distributions drop 10%. They nodded like chastened children. Even Uncle Richard, who'd never nodded to anyone. One last thing. I paused at the door. That missing $240 million? It's been recovered. All of it. Plus interest. I looked at Thomas. It's funding our European expansion. Legitimately this time. Outside, my driver held the car door. The evening air felt clean, full of possibility. That was. Thomas searched for words. Justice, I supplied, with a touch of mercy. They'll never be the same. Good. I checked my phone. Goldman Sachs had confirmed tomorrow's meeting. The old way was destroying everything. Sometimes you have to break something completely to rebuild it right. He laughed suddenly. That target blazer really was brilliant. Keep as a reminder, I smiled. Never judge by appearances. My phone buzzed again. Maya sending tomorrow's schedule. Board meetings, investment reviews, client calls. The real work of building something lasting. Ready to learn how it's really done? I asked Thomas. He nodded, understanding the opportunity being offered. Lead the way, sis. As we drove through the city, past buildings and businesses I quietly owned or controlled, I thought about that young graduate in the old photo. The quiet one they'd underestimated. the one who'd watched and learned and built an empire right under their noses. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying your enemies. It's forcing them to become better than they were. And I was just getting started.